Anime has become very mainstream over the years, and it begs the question, what makes anime so unique? Maybe you've heard of shows like Attack on Titan being compared to historical successes like Breaking Bad, or maybe you've heard of some of the weird things anime has to offer. But the point is that anime has had a huge influence all over the world, and I want to explore how that came to be and the effects that anime has had. With that in mind, let's get into this. From the Japanese perspective, most would say the word anime simply refers to anything that has been animated, so a cartoon like SpongeBob would be considered an anime. However, when talking about anime throughout this video, we will be using the more common understanding of the word anime, which basically just refers to any Japanese style animation. And I know this can get tricky with a few series that are referred to as anime, Avatar, but we won't be getting into that today. Historically, one of the first animes to be shown in Japan was a propaganda film called Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors, where the protagonist tries to defend Japan, and this film was made in 1945 towards the inevitable defeat of Japan during World War II. But when looking at Momotaro, it doesn't have the complete aesthetic that other animes have. So for example, Astro Boy, which is one of the first animes popular for its time, which is adapted from its equally popular manga, shows some of the distinct features that animes have, such as the big eyes. These type of big eyes have become a staple of the anime style. And speaking of the style, while most modern anime use digital animation, which basically uses software and computers, the old style of anime was made by cell animation. And this type of animation is drawn onto something that's called celluloid sheets. There is a charm about the old style of anime that isn't often seen in modern anime, but both can still be very visually stunning. So while on the topic of old animation versus new animation, I want to talk about our next segment. Between the 80s and 90s, anime had its first big surge of shows and movies that became more known to the West. The first of which was a film called Akira. Many people in the West who thought of cartoons as just some Disney film for children would be shocked at how adult-like Akira would depict things. Akira has a lot of blood and gore, and honestly deserves its own separate video for how impactful it is, but just to briefly touch on it, there are many examples of Akira being referenced in mainstream media, and one of those references is by popular rapper Kanye West, who shows homage to Akira, his favorite anime film, by including inspired scenes from the film in his own music video.
I know I got to be right now, cause I can't get much stronger. Man, I've been waiting all night now.
Other animes such as Pokemon, Sailor Moon, and Dragon Ball had a similar effect in the West that Akira had. All of these weren't considered as anime because the concept of Japanese cartoons hadn't been well known yet, and many people who watched these animes thought it was just cartoons that had a different feel from the ordinary cartoons. And then the second big surge happened in the 90s to early 2000s, with a phenomenon that Westerners like to call the Big Three. Although the Big Three may originally reference the huge manga sales of these series in Shonen Jump, in the West it was used as a term to refer to those three series as animes that aired on Western cartoon channels. These Big Three are One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach. Each of these shows had hundreds of episodes and tackled many themes such as loneliness, loss, grief, and other mature content that wasn't typical of Western cartoons. This plus the boom of the internet age would slowly but surely open up the gates of anime becoming more mainstream. And with anime becoming more mainstream, a lot of concerns would be raised. Japan and Western countries like the US have different concerns when it comes to what can be shown to kids. While Japan is more lax, the US is heavy on censorship. Many early animes were censored to prevent children from copying the behaviors of characters in the shows or films. To add to this idea of different morals, one big issue that many people have about anime is that there is so much sexualization, especially considering that some of the shows or films are targeted at a young audience or teenage audience. And even worse, there is a lot of sexualization of underage characters, some of which are even childlike. There are many other controversies that surround anime that we could get into, but one last one is that there is sometimes racist caricatures of black people in anime, which spread stereotypes that are offensive. Recently, more creators of anime have become aware of this worldwide audience, and they have made the necessary changes to their creations in order to not strike anger with the fans. And it is important to bring light to these things, especially now that the internet has made everything more accessible. But I just want to put out there that creators should not get death threats for trivial reasons, so please do keep that in mind. Anime in recent time has been pumped out like crazy, with many shows and films constantly being released seasonally. This paired with the overwork culture in Japan is a big contributor to mental health issues and the fatigue that Japanese animators face. Many people sometimes complain about the animation quality but don't consider the fact that many of these animators are underpaid and overworked. With huge time constraints, there is an intense work ethic, but despite these hardships, animators still have the ability to convey beautiful art in anime, which leads me to my last topic. The question of why anime is unique is the whole purpose of this video, and I want to provide an example of a scene that works best in this medium to prove how beautiful anime can be. I want to bring attention to this movie in the corner of this world. So it starts off as just black and white, with a few lines, white lines, just being scribbled. And it's very simplistic at the beginning. It's like a record scratching in the background. Subtle music. Slowly there's more color and the music starts turning up. And this talks about what if she held the little girl on the other side instead of the side that she was holding her. This perfectly depicts the feeling of regret, despair, and self-blame. I don't think anything else could have depicted better. If it was live action, I don't think it could capture that emotion. And don't get me wrong, like, live action can depict certain emotions better than if it were drawn. But in this instance, that feeling of despair and regret, I just couldn't find anything else that I could relate, because I had those feelings too. And this is the first time that I saw something that perfectly encapsulated all of those emotions. It was beautifully done, beautifully drawn, good use of music. That's why I think for this example, this is probably one of the best uses that anime can have of portraying certain emotions or ideas or themes. To sum up, anime has been a part of many people's lives during the 90s and early 2000s, including myself, who grew up when anime started booming. And when I was growing up, I had a bad childhood because I lived in the projects of the Bronx in New York City. I was always a shy kid, and kids would always make fun of my mom who was handicapped, which made me really feel all alone. So as corny as this may sound, watching something like Naruto, who's a kid who was ostracized by his village and grew up lonely and had to struggle in poor conditions, was really relatable to me. I've never really seen any show at that young of an age that really reached my emotions like that. And Naruto's ideal of never giving up, as cheesy and simple as it may be, it still made me feel better about my situation. And it's thanks to shows like that that made me explore more anime, and I found a great deal of them that helped comfort me emotionally in ways that live action couldn't. While live action does have its strengths and is equally good at conveying feelings, I think that anime has its own strengths that it can convey really well through its own medium. And so I'm glad I found anime, and I hope it continues to grow and become better. And I hope whoever is watching this can also feel a connection through that beautiful medium. Thank you for watching.